I live at the moment in Thailand, but I often go to Myanmar, so I kind of commute between Thailand and Myanmar. And yes, this is where I live, and then I work mostly in Southeast Asia about Southeast Asian issue. Yes, I do lots of things. I research about how media is used in terms of social change, political change. That's research. And also I work with local people to establish independent media, because this is what I do most of my life. This is what I have been doing in other part of the world. So I always work with local people to create the independent media in a kind of true sense, so that they can have a voice, and then that voice can eventually affect some kind of change. And so that's what I do also in Thailand and Myanmar, and maybe in other Southeast Asian country if there is some need for it. But in various ways. In Myanmar, I started the film education because I realized that when I started going there was really no opportunity for people to learn how to make films and video. And so the result was that any image that was coming out from Myanmar was maybe some Western journalist or Western filmmaker who would smuggle cameras into that country and film there for like maybe 3 or 4 days with a hidden camera. So the more blurred the image was, the more the authentic the news looked. And that would give the feeling that this journalist took a risk, and then, he was a very brave journalist, and then this journalist would smuggle the footage out, also brave act, and then show his or her footage, and then get the recognition. But how about the local people? Usually it's the local people who would help those projects will be persecuted very severely. I mean, those journalists can just, get out of the country. But then there are always some locals who would help those projects, right? So those people are usually heavily punished. And the worst, they have no chance to see how they are portrayed, right? Because they have no chance to see the finished product, finished footage, right? And also, the problem was that those people who would come from outside, they only stay for a very short period of time, and they don't necessarily know the real situation. And so I thought that people have a right, the local people have a right to create their own documentary or news or film, video. But there was absolutely no chance for them to learn how to do it. So this is how I started the, let's say, film course, video course. So that's what I've been mostly doing in Myanmar. Whereas in Thailand, I mostly work with a political activist who came to ask me to teach them how to use new media, because political activists wanted to learn the new activism, and they heard about me, so they asked me to teach them the use of media. So I have been giving a series of workshops on that. But not only that, because one of my background is art, so I don't only teach media as media. I'm not a journalist, and I'm not NGO either. So my course is always different from, let's say, NGOs, empowering project, workshop on how to create your citizen journalism and stuff. That's mine is always different. So I always include artistic element and creativity into the workshop. So when I give a workshop, I include the use of new technology, new media, as well as creativity and artistic strategy. So that's what I do. So I moved to Southeast Asia from Eastern Europe in 2002. And so since then, this is what I have been doing in Southeast Asia. But it's not only that. I'm also a writer. And so my topic, or whatever I do, is transition, the people in the transition, social transition. And so I always witness how people live, how people manage to live during the time of transition, various transition, and I write about it. I'm an essayist, so I write about it. And also I'm an art curator, so I do an art exhibition as well. Also with this topic of people in a society in transition. So probably you can categorize me as three different professionals. One is, let's say, I don't know, media activist, let's say, and writer, and art curator. So that's three things. Maybe educator, because sometimes I teach at also educational institution as well as independent organizations and the groups as well. I started from communist countries, so that's my first journey of society in transition. And so in 1988, I moved from Japan to communist Eastern Europe, and I witnessed the early signs of transitions, reform and revolutions of Eastern Europe, which exploded in 1989. And also I immediately started to work with underground opposition people who were using the media. At that time, it was mostly video technology, video media to, let's say, to create their own news, because at that time they couldn't trust any state news. And actually, it was the only state news at that time, and then nobody could trust those state news or radio, right? And so, so those oppositions were using the video camera, videotapes to disseminate information, news to citizens. So there are different group of people and different methods that they were doing and different places they were doing it, and different countries throughout Eastern Europe. So I traveled throughout the whole Eastern European countries and worked with all those people. And so that time was a communist transition, so from communist to democracy. And then 1989, the revolutions of Eastern Europe has mostly achieved. And then I stayed on for a while, and then Yugoslavian civil war started. So I worked on that issue. So that was more or less the transition, but not to the democracy, but more like opposite. I think Yugoslavia at that time, because they are not completely hardcore communists, so they are like more or less their own system of socialism. So they had a certain degree of freedom in Yugoslavia until 1989, when the other East European country was in a hardcore communism. And the result was that there was some kind of holes in the gaze of the world. So they were not really watching that area so carefully because they thought that this is not so dangerous or not so hardcore communism, and there was not such a rapid changes there. And so this is my theory, that when the gaze is not focused on some area, so there's some kind of the organic desire for that area, for locals, to get the attentions, to get the gaze, and there starts something. So it occurs something, it happens something, in order to get all those attentions and the gaze. So that's actually my theory when after I was witnessing all those regions. And then before we knew it, so many problems started there in the Yugoslavia, each Yugoslavian republic. And some republic, some states started to be independent, and then fighting, ethnic cleansing started, and before we knew it, it became the biggest tragedy, the biggest catastrophe after the World War II in that area. So that was a transition from the whole of the gaze into the catastrophe. So that was another kind of transition. So transition doesn't necessarily for positive or for better. Transition can be also an opposite way, right? So that I witnessed that. It was really tragedy. I felt really, really sorry about that time. But then I did my own research in that in order for us to learn. So I started to research about at that time there was a project, very ambitious project called UTEL, which was to create the Universal Yugoslavian Television Station. And so they would hire the newscaster from each state of Yugoslavia, and then make a balanced news that satisfy almost all the Republican states. And so that was a very ambitious project, but it was catastrophe failed. It was fiasco, and I wanted to find out why it was failed. So that was one research, and the other project was more like artistic project. So I realized that Nikola Tesla, who invented AC versus Edison's DC, he is a really hero of every Yugoslavian people. The Croats, Serbs, Bosnian, everybody absolutely admires him, universally. So I thought that he probably could be a figure that could unite. I mean, unite is a really big word, but like somehow all those people could share the same passions and same admiration for one thing, and then collaborate. So I did a different project on Nikola Tesla, an art project, and I work with the different people in the different Republican states of Yugoslavia. So I did that. So that was another transition. And then afterwards, many countries in former East Europe joined the European unions and achieved more or less kind of European style of democracy. And then I started also helping Kazakhstan or Central Asia and then Caucasus area such as Georgia. And then by that time, I became kind of known to media activist, political activist circle. So that's why I started to be asked to go to those areas. So that's why I went to Kazakhstan or those places. And then I was asked by the Burmese people to help them. It was in 2000. And at that time, I wasn't sure if I could involve in that part of the world, because at that time I was heavily involved in Eastern Europe and so on. But then also something really pushed me, and then I moved there. So I packed up again everything and I moved there. And so that's the transition of Myanmar is, as you know, it's from the military dictatorship to now we finally achieve some certain form of freedom. It's not completely a democratic country because it's Asia. And so, but it's much better than before. So now it's the transition. And whereas Thailand is, I would say, it's a feudalistic country. Probably people don't agree with me, and some people don't want to hear it. But it's a class society. It's really heavily class society. And so the system is so rigid, so established, so that the people in the lower class, they have no chance to really go up the ladder. However, with the globalization and with the emergence of internet, people in the lower class who are mostly neglected, or people who live in a neglected area, they started to be aspiring. So they started to be middle class. And people in the upper class, upper middle class, upper class, aristocrats, they got really threatened because the system, all this system that they created was such that those people in the lower class were supposed to live with a charity forever. Right? So the upper class, they are very generous, so they would give away certain wealth. And then the lower class, they forever, they will appreciate, those who got with it because of charity. But now those structure is started to be collapsed. And then there was the one business tycoon who accelerated that process. That's why now it's really, it's a big explosions of the changes. And the changes, the changing force, and then the force that try to block that change. So is now really conflicting. And it's almost in the verge of explosion. So that is real transition for me, the transition from feudalism to, let's say, the middle-class civil society. So that's very, very interesting to me. And at the same time, the king, who is considered as a demigod, he is already very old, and he would die sometime soon, probably. People who live now, they never live without him entire life, most of the people. And because he is considered as a demigod, they would not know what to do if he died. So there's a huge apprehensions about this time. And that also reflect on this, there was a coup d'etat and almost a nearly civil war and that kind of situation. And for me, that is enormously interesting because when the Japanese emperor died, that was in 1989, I already left Japan. I wasn't Japan anymore. And so I missed that. I missed the death of the former god. But he wasn't God anymore when he died. So he died as a human. But he was a former god. So if I was there, it would have been very, very interesting, the time of transition for the Japanese people as well. But I missed that. At the time, by the way, it was also one of the most interesting event in terms of media history in Japan in various ways. So I acknowledged that. So I asked my media scholar colleague to record all those 3 days of so-called X day. The X day is the day emperor died and after X day. So, and then I got those footage and I analyzed those footage as well. But I missed that in Japan, and I was not there physically. And so I don't want to miss that anymore. So that the death of God is, the transition of the death of God is so precious that you cannot replace with anything, to me, this experience. Because I experienced a transition from communist to democracy and military to democracy, and I never had this experience of the death of the God in terms of the form of transition. So I have to have that experience. So that's very, very precious experience. It will be to me. So I have to be there. I have to witness no matter what. So you cannot replace that experience with anything else. So that's why I have to be there. And Myanmar opened up, so I had a chance to move there. So I almost started to live in Myanmar. But then the coup d'etat happened in Thailand 2 times after I moved there, 2006 and 2014. And then 2014 coup d'etat was much severe than the 2006 coup d'etat. And so I had to choose if I would start a new life in Myanmar, which is like a very positive transition, or I would continue monitoring that situation in Thailand. And I decided to go back to Thailand because I saw that this transition of the death of the god is it's so unique, and I have to witness there. Yes, I was a video curator in Japan, and I would say I did a lot in terms of promoting video art and also independent media for that matter, which was not so known in a society. And also I worked with a representative artist who started using video technology and so on. However, I wasn't really happy because the information which was coming to Japan from abroad was mostly Western information. Actually, in that organization, it was mostly American because the owner of that organization, she was grown up in America. She was artist also in America, working with all those American artists. So our organization was almost like branch of EAT, Experimental Art and Technology. So all those EAT artists was coming there, and so mostly it was American-oriented place. That was interesting itself, but then I wasn't happy with this dominance of information, so I went to Europe to see what was happening in Europe. So I researched for 1 year in Europe. Then I came back, but I was still not happy because the Europe that I went was Western Europe. I thought it was still the gap in the information. And there was a huge area in the world which we don't know anything about, and then information was not coming out. And I really had an inner urge to know it. I really wanted to know it. And so that's one thing. And then the second thing was at that time in the 1980s, the media technology started to change. It started to be more portable. So the video 8 came out, and it was very, very small. So I saw that, if the technology is that small, we could smuggle those technology in and out of the border easier than before, even to the place or from the place where the media and expression is strictly limited or regulated. And I started to research about those issues, but in Japan, especially in Japan at that time, I couldn't get any valuable information. And so I thought I had to go there and do it myself, experiment myself, and how it happened. So that's the one reason. And then also the satellite. There was also satellite technology was heavily promoted in Japan, actually. And it was so heavily promoted that almost every citizens could have an illusion that everybody could have access to satellite channel, or even forced to have it because it was industry. And also I thought, okay, the satellite dish. If we have a satellite dish in our vicinity, we could catch the information from somewhere else, right? So if the dish was closer to the border, you could catch probably some TV signal from the neighboring country. And I also wanted to see how people are using all the satellite dish in those restricted countries. And then I really imagined that the picture of satellite dish directed towards one direction, like sunflowers to the sun. So I really had this picturesque, the image of sunflower, like, satellite antenna, directing to maybe west. And I really wanted to see it, if there were anything like that. So that's the two things. And I just had the urge, so I just packed everything and left everything, and I just went in 1988. Yeah. So it was a more or less combination of need to see it, need to experiment, and need to have information which was not available. So that was more or less. I didn't have that, at that time, idea that I would be activist or anything like that. No, I just wanted to see it and I wanted to experiment. But then the moment I arrived, I immediately started to meet all those people who were using all those video technology and then, using it for change. And then immediately I started to work with them. And then, before I knew it, I became the activist myself because I started working with them. Mostly at that time, by carrier of information, because I work with all those people, activists, and they were making the video, and I was carrying the information of them and bring all those information, videotapes, out of the border, and then show those video images to the Western people and showing that that's happening in Eastern Europe, and vice versa. So I brought information from West in the form of videotapes and show it to the people in Eastern Europe. So I was crossing the border with lot of videotapes. So my suitcase was full of videotapes, and I was crossing the border. So naturally, I became activist in that way. Like I was a carrier, like almost like a drug carrier, drug dealer or something. And then people again started to know about my activity. So I started to get a lot of phone calls from different parts of Eastern Europe. So they would ask me, we want to see so-and-so image or so-and-so information, we want to get it. And then I would pack those videotapes and then take a night train and then arrive in that place in the morning and just put the video cassette and then show it. Yeah? So I was really traveling around also Eastern Europe, also within the Eastern Europe, with this mission, with the videotapes as well. So I was doing that, yeah. So I was videotapes, a lot of videotapes, yes. Yes, it was maybe, but this is what I learned from that time, and this is I still continue that kind of key information. Usually, each totalitarian country, they check more locals. Of course, they check foreigners, but relatively, they check more locals. So let's say if I am in a compartment of train, the police arrive, immigration officer arrive, because the compartment is mixed with the locals, they would check more locals, more than me. And I could always pretend that I'm completely ignorant. Japanese who don't know anything about politics, and at that time, I could pretend that I was, because I was almost like student, so like, yeah, Japanese student girl who like don't know anything about blah, blah, blah. And so I could pretend that. So I had to performance. Yeah. Performing is also crucial. And so I still continue those things. In Myanmar, I don't have to do it anymore, thankfully, but until several years back, I was still doing it. So like I was wearing like ridiculously, stupid clothes, like, spaghetti strap, like, la 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 la, I don't know anything. And then when I was also carrying the information, lots of information in and out, right? So then the custom tried to open it. Actually, to Myanmar in and out, we have to also go through the X-ray. And then if they found something suspicious, they cross with a chalk. They cross the baggage with a chalk. And then I will bring the luggage to the toilet and I just erase it and bring it back. And then as they try to open it, I kind of try to charm them, like, with such a smile and, I'm a tourist, and then, oh yeah, tourist, okay, here we go, and stuff. So, performance. And then also this crucial information that would give me more confident. So you have to be really confident. If you are very afraid, they catch it, and then they will suspect you, and then they open. So information is crucial, and then information is accumulated from the experience. So that's why I have experience. I have years and years of experience now, so I can do it more comfortably, and then I know how I could use more or less. There is a certain holes in the system in a totalitarianism, and how much I can use it, or the border that I should not cross, So that kind of thing that we can only acquire from experience, and then I have it, and that's exactly the reason that I also engage myself for education, because I really believe that for those who knows it, or for those who have experience, have a responsibility to share. So that's why I believe that I have to share this experience to people. So that's why I'm engaged in the education area as well. First of all, I have to say that there is no official course on media activism anywhere. This is a completely neglected area. And so we have, like media activists like me, like us, we have a network, because there are not many of people like us, so we kind of help each other in terms of sharing information, sharing experience among us. So that's the one thing. But they are also mostly engaged in teaching and also education area with the same belief like me. And so although there is no really the course of media activism as such, it depends on the professor or teacher in different schools. You can actually learn it. So I always recommend that people who want to learn let's say if they want to learn like media activism per se, it doesn't, don't depend on the school or don't depend on the course, but depend on the teachers. So look for teachers. So I would recommend some teachers to them. And so that's one thing. And so I'm one of those teachers. And then I taught in different places, not only the official schools, but also different organizations and really different countries, different form of institutions, and different people, different age group. as well. And so from where I should start? So maybe from official educational institution. I don't disregard the official institutions like such as university and art school. I always recommend people to use resources of those institutions because those official institutions have resources which I cannot provide as an independent teacher. So if I teach there, I would also use those resources, right? And so, for example, when I was teaching at the Karlsruhe, this University of Arts and Design is connected to the most famous Media and Technology Center, which is ZKM Karlsruhe. And they boast themselves as the center, so they have the most advanced technology of everything. So I thought, why not? I had hundreds of magnetic videotapes, which I accumulated from my Eastern European time as well as my days in Southeast Asia. And magnetic tapes deteriorates. And because I brought all those magnetic tapes to the worst place to keep magnetic tapes, which is humid, dusty, and hot. And people were like completely shocked that I did that. And I have and then lots of so-called official institutions like universities, they want to have my materials, right? They really want to have them. But because of the difficulty of clearing all the copyrights, it's very difficult to donate or to sell all those tapes. So I still haven't managed it. But so many requests came to acquire my archive. I did something, but not the complete ones. But anyway, I have urgencies to preserve all those tapes. So I use the time of my teaching, three semesters of my professorship job, to digitalize it. So I brought all those videotapes to Germany, and then all those my off time, if I'm not teaching, I was in the studios to digitalize. And they are very generous, so they allow me to do it. So so those kind of resources is very necessary, right? And that is the same for, let's say, political activism. The political activism area needs the person like me who is a completely freelance, who doesn't belong to any institution, so we are mobile. So that's why, when somebody asks me to show some video, I don't have to ask any permission from any boss or any group or any higher authorities to go there. So I just, decide myself and then, bring and pack the videotape, and then I can just take the next night train and then arrive in the morning. So it's very quick and mobile. If I belong to NGO, it's not that mobile. But NGO is also necessary because they can network people. They can network, they can mobilize. And they have certain resources as well. So we need that too. But also we need a bigger entity such as UN or UNESCO or those things. We need that too because of the influence to the world and the window to the world. And then also even bigger resources. So that is the same. So that is the same for the education. So we need, so in the education field, we need a very flexible teacher like me, and also like institutions, a bigger institution, because they have resources. So we all feel the gap each other. So feel the disadvantage or advantage to each other. So this is how it works. This is how I also learned too. Yes, but not only the independent educator, but also, let's say, independent media activists as such. As a instructor of media activism, I have to prove that we can live out of the system, because this is what I teach. I don't teach this everywhere. I don't teach to the normal students. I only teach this to the real hardcore political activists or media activists. So this is more like a limited education to limited number of people. But still, I have to do that. And in order to tell them that it's possible, I have to prove, right? So I have to experiment myself to be convincing. So that's why I'm having this life of living out of system as much as possible. And I would tell you, I wouldn't recommend to anyone. This is just so hard. But nevertheless, I have to prove it. For example, I have to prove that, you can live without a credit card. And I'm thinking that maybe I will start tweeting, like the problem that I will get, like every time I will get, by not having a credit card, tweeting like one item each, because there are so many. Like, just to pick up the credit card issue, alone, I mean, like the society try to convince you that you need that, Everybody, company-wise, government-wise, when you arrive in a hotel in Korea, they ask you to submit a credit card, right? And if I said I don't have a credit card, they almost like, they look at me like I'm not a human. So that is, like in everyday life. They really try to convince you this norm, so-called norm. Or like, supermarket, they convince you to get each supermarket, like shopping cart or something. And then, of course, it's a tempting because there will be discount, but I don't register, right? Because my policy. And, always I have to see those, special discount for the card member, so many, and there's so much discount, like, it's a discount, it's so tempting. So it's a temptation is everywhere, and then also persuasion everywhere around you. So it's a very difficult life. But if I live ordinary life, then then I am not a convincing person to tell them. So I have to do that, and then I have to do that as much as I can. But I really cannot recommend to anyone. I don't want to recommend that life to anyone. There was also some fashionable term of bare life, maybe 10 years ago or something. So it's a little bit like a bare life situation, right? So you are free, you're completely free, but you're vulnerable, that kind of life. So it's exactly like that. Especially, I would say, after the 9/11. Especially after 9/11, the people like us, maybe let's say, I would call it bohemian. Yeah? Bohemian's life became hell. Yes. Now, every political or commercial entity try to identify you, who you are, in the name of security. For example, when you check in to some airline, and they will ask you to present the return ticket. But return ticket, not necessarily return ticket to your original, the departure place, but return ticket to your country, your mother country. But that's not the problem of them. That's not the business of them, right? When I decide to go back to my country to see my mom, right? So that's not their business. But they said now it's their business. Yeah. So all those details really changed so much after the 9/11. So that's why I don't like terrorists, because those terrorists, terrorist act, is really reducing the freedom of the real free people, who are not really here to harm people. Right? We just want the freedom. We just want to prove that the people are born free. We don't have to be bounded by nationality or passport or family name. So we are born free. So people like us wants to prove that, and wants to prove that the system is made to restrict you. So you don't really have to be out of system, but you have to be aware that system is system. It's not the nature. So you have to be aware that there is also option not to be in the system, although it doesn't look so, and people don't tell you so. However, the nature and the system is a different thing. Right? So that's just to raise awareness that somebody has to tell or to experiment, but then those terrorists, they are making those activities much more difficult. So it's getting really, really harder because of the new technology as well. That now also the airport. I was coming here from the Suvarnabhumi airport, Thai airport. They also started using this total scanning, like, that you completely become naked. That they started it. Yeah. So then they will start the facial recognition technology. And that's before we knew it, we don't have a right to protest in the name of security, but I think we do have a right to protest. But everything is done under the excuse of security at the moment. Actually, I feel that there are, of course, everybody feels that, everybody feel like they are, the system need to change, and frustration about it, and everybody like us, we are feeling that the people are feeling that, But then the consensus is that people still don't know how. But I see a little bit of this and that here and there. Some kind of new things is emerging that looks really promising. So I also want to see that, and even maybe would participate in those new system after capitalism. Communism didn't work. Capitalism said that. And then, capitalism, but it's not the victory of capitalism. It's not as much as they claim. So we would need a new system. But so far the consensus is that we are not able to create that, the completely new system. But I still believe that could be done, and I started to see the little sign of it, emergence of those, and that's kind of positive sign, and it's actually an exciting period. In terms of media field, people who engage in P2P, I think they will do something interesting. So it's also together, not only the technology and the system, but also spirit, all together in one. And so I'm meeting all those people who are engaged in promoting more use of P2P. That is the kind of autonomous system that is not be dictated by a government or the commercial companies. And if that becomes more widespread, I think it could become more wider, like more effective system. But people have to really learn that, because everything is new, and so these people, but different type of P2P, yes. And there's also some poet who is creating a system called communism. So it's not communist, but communism, which is similar to P2P idea. But it's much more about economic system. And so that could be also very interesting. And so that people started to create it, started to philosophize it, started to create it. I think that's a time, maybe, similar to when Karl Marx was, he saw that, we have to create this new system because this also, bloody industry or capitalism doesn't work. So that time created that, communism, socialism system. But maybe we're getting into that another period when so many thinkers or so many creative people started to think that, okay, so we need a new system, and then, they started doing it. Maybe that's an optimistic scenario, but because I'm witnessing the seed of it here and there, and I can probably be a little bit optimistic about it, or at least it's getting exciting, I would say. Definitely, I'm anti-hierarchy system, for sure, absolutely for sure. And in terms of education, I believe that the teacher is probably has to take a role of instructor or gatekeeper or just the guidance, not the authority. and to guide the students how to use that information and that informations, and where they can get those informations and how to get it, and how they can edit it for themselves, for their needs. So this is what I believe. So that's also I learned, let's say, in Myanmar, actually. Yes. So you can really learn those things, you know, in an unexpected place, right? When I arrived in Myanmar, I was really shocked, actually, because I work in a totalitarianism, one totalitarianism in which they take out all the information. So they deny the access of information to citizens. So it's citizens is deprived of information. So that's the totalitarianism that I knew and I worked in. Whereas in Myanmar, they were full of informations. So, you know, the local, like street vendors are selling all those pirate. At that time it was a VCD, video CD. You know? VCD were everywhere. And of course, there was no internet cafe as such then, but then they started the internet cafe, and then, of course, it was completely restricted, but, you know, the people, you know how to use a proxy and stuff. So there was information, so that's why I was so confused at the beginning. And then as a person who would teach about filmmaking and so on, and or media activism, I had to really change my mindset about the education method from that totalitarianism without information to totalitarianism with information, but without the guidance, without the education as to how people can use all the information. So I call it junk of information. So people are overwhelmed by the junk of information in which people don't know how to use all this junk, right? Because absolutely there was no guidance on that. I thought this is almost the same. You know, the society without information or society with full of those junk informations or noise without completely education and guidance in how to use the information. That's a kind of new, totalitarianism that's very interesting. It's a very challenging for also the educator or instructor like me. So what I did was I call the city as a forest, and we have to survive in a forest. And in order to survive the forest, we need to know which fruits is edible and which mushroom is edible and which mushroom is poisonous and which fruit is poisonous, right? And how much the nutrition we can get from those fruits or plants and from those mushrooms, right? So I applied that forest system. And so I started to show the films, but the good films that I would think that is a good film or it is regarded as a good film, like a classic films at the beginning, also for the safety reason. And then after the film, we will move to tea house and discuss. Okay, so that part was missing from the previous, the period. Right? So people could watch film, but there was no chance for people to discuss in the public, so, right? So that is a kind of new beginning. So people watch together in a semi-public place. It depends on the situation. We had to move around different places. And then in more like a public place, we moved to tea house, which is completely public. Anybody can come in, and even police listen to you. Discuss about the film. And then after that, we go into downtown and hunt also VCD and later become DVD. And people have to acquire the eyes to hunt, you know, like kind of, maybe this is a good film, maybe this is junk, you know, like just a blood and gore, you know, stupid film or something. And people have to watch it at home and then have to tell me what they thought about it afterwards, or maybe write something. And then, so that's how I started it. And that really was an interesting experience for me. And after that, you know, people are very clever. People are intelligent. So after, like, you know, I did, you know, certain period of time. And I said, okay, so next time until I come back from Bangkok to Yangon, maybe you can watch all those films. You can hunt and watch and tell me what you thought. And then I go next time and then ask them, so what did you watch? They would say, Dog's Bill, let's say, Dog's Bill. Dog Bill? Like, you mean last one, 3? Yes, Dogma 95. It was so quick, you know, they acquired, you know, the eyes to handle all the Dogma 95 film and then watch it and consume it and discuss it. So I saw that, you know, I had to start maybe from Citizen Kane, right? But then, like, the jump was so quick. So, you know, like, you just give a little bit tip to how to use all those information. And people are born intelligent. They don't need to be told from zeros to that levels of you have to sing like this, you have to sing this, you have to sing this, you have to sing this. And especially this time. So I learned that, but that I learned this really precious lesson from Burmese people, which, you know, we think that those Burmese people, you know, in a totalitarian society, you know, they don't know much about the world. No, we can learn from them also. And that's always, for me, the education is a barter. It's not the one way. I really refuse that I only give the knowledge and information. And always I learn from the participants or students or the local people. And if the education is not this barter system, I refuse to do that. I refuse to teach. So that's why I only teach in those places I find is fascinating or interesting, and then I think that's, you know, something I can learn. So, and then I always learn a lot of things from those people. So the teacher there's no hierarchy for me, so we have to learn from the students as well. So also in this sense, I don't believe in hierarchy as well. I think meme is a very good word, actually. Yeah. Meme is considered as a more or less like secondary form of like culture activity by the artists. Yeah. Some of the artists don't take it seriously, right? But then meme has its own value. Yeah. And then also, especially this time around, we have to learn from you know, what the memers are doing, you know, the patterns of memers or like creativity of memers. And yeah, I mean, that's, we can use that for more like in the education area as well. Yeah, and, yeah, I would say meme is a good word. Yeah, and also on the other thing is that I believe we have to motivate people, motivators, and maybe we'll say inspiration. Yeah, inspirator. Yeah, and but to be inspirator, you know, like. You have to be interesting person yourself, right? Yeah. So that's how I have to always achieve myself. And I always say to my students that if it's art school, maybe you will not become the most successful artist in the art market, but at least you will become the interesting person. That's a guaranteed. Yeah. And those interesting people will go out to the society and then will, you know, in various degrees, they would change. They would change the way people see things, the perspective of things. That's the most precise things about, precious things about art, right? Because art is about, you know, to offer different perspective of the things. And so I believe my students would do and are doing it right now. Somewhere up there.